So today we've got Sean's T6.1 in the garage. He's had a little trouble starting it over the last few weeks. It's been getting progressively slower and slower on the starter motor, and he was getting to a point where he was going to be worried whether it was going to start or not, so I've taken a look at it. Originally when I tested it, I found that the battery was no good. So we fitted a new battery, it was all fine for a while, and then it slowly started getting slower and slower again. So I took another look at it, and it didn't appear to be charging very well. So these have got a smart charge alternator, anything from Euro 5 and Euro 6 onwards, a smart charge, but it just didn't seem to be doing what it should do. So I traced all the wiring back, there was no volt drop between the alternator and the battery, yada, yada, yada. Everything was spot on with the wiring. So the only fault was the alternator itself was quite lazy. It would start charging and then shut off a little bit early. And you'd have to encourage it to start charging as well sometimes. So that leaves me with an alternator change. This is the first one I've done on a T6.1. So let's see how we go. First things first, we need to disconnect the battery. I don't want to arc that live feed out down at the alternator end. But before I disconnect the battery, I better check that Sean's got the radio code. That could be fun, couldn't it? Yeah, he's got it in the manual. All good, so let's get the radio off. Let's get the battery disconnected. Off. 10 mil, nice and easy. Go, let's have a look. Where are you out on the alternator? I found the alternator. It's wedged above the aircon compressor. Just about see my finger tapping the front of the pulley of the alternator, and below it is the aircon compressor. But first we've got to get the belt off. It's pretty tight in there, but I need to remove the belt first. So we're going to go in with this 16 mil on a lever bar, 16 mil on a knuckle bar, and pop the sprung tensioner off and get the belt off. Easy as that. Right, here we go. Okay. Right, look at that. The tensioner and the air compressor unit. I'm just going to leave that round the crank and leave my knuckle bar out there with the 16 mil socket. It's sort of wedged itself now, so I'm going to leave it there for when I need to put the belt back on. Right, next we need to pop the air compressor out of the way. Hopefully I'm going to be able to drop this down without having to remove the gas from the aircon system. I don't really want to do that. Hopefully we've got enough free length on the pipes to be able to dangle it down so we can get out the alternator, because it's directly above that aircon compressor. Okay, well let's unplug it and unbolt it and see if it comes out. Pretty good. Lovely. Hold on here now. The aircon compressor is bolted on with three 13 mil headed bolts, M8, that go through into the brackets. I've got a lovely long spanner here, so it makes life a bit easier. Loads of leverage. He said, but I might not be able to get all of them. With that, I might have to use my cranked angle spanner, but let's see. That's that cracked off. There we go. Right, so that's them cracked off, and now we can just wind them out. And hopefully, we've got enough room with the aircon compressor out of the way to get the alternator out. If not, I suppose we take the engine out, I'm not sure.
The whole engine?
Yeah, probably the whole engine. Make life a lot easier, wouldn't it? Oh, it's filthy under here, Sean. What have you been doing? It's like he's been driving through fields and stuff.
Bit of off-roading?
Yeah, a bit of off-roading in the T6. Hasn't even got swamper tyres on it. So I've got the aircon compressor undone and hanging, but unfortunately VW didn't make the pipes long enough. So what I was hoping to happen was that it came actually out the way that I could bring the alternator through that hole, but that's not the case. So we'd either have to take all the gas out of the aircon system, which we haven't got an aircon machine, so we're not doing that. So our next point of call would be to remove the engine mount on the front. So this front engine mount here, going to get that out of the way and then hopefully be able to bring our alternator through. Obviously now this is loose, I can move it a bit more and bring the alternator through where this engine mount is. Well, that's what we're going to try anyway. So that's the next move. Let's get that off. So first I'm going to undo these 13 mil bolts that go up through into the engine mount from the subframe. Let's get those out of the way. And then we can unbolt the engine mount from the engine itself and hopefully lift that somewhere out the way. I don't know how much room we've got to lift that out of the way actually. We'll find out. So the final bolt is a little bit difficult to get to. It's over the top of the engine mount and screws into the top of the block. I think I've got it. I'm just going to twiddle it out.
How are you going to get it back in?
Don't know. I'll work a plan out when we get to it. I could leave it out. No, not really. I'll have to go in some point with a magnet maybe, or a very long skinny finger hand, like arm. Maybe I just need another elbow about here. That'll be all right. That's fine. Free as a bird there. Amazingly, it's still in there. Also, I've got to be careful, I don't want to shove it through the radiator. Okay, so I think the only way is to come down this side instead of that side of the engine mount before. Here we go. Ta-da! It's a baby boy. Bit of a job. Right. Which is fine.
Now how do you get the alternator?
Well, I don't know. Does that actually help me or not? I don't know. Yeah, I reckon so. I reckon we can get some unplug that. Like that. Let's move him out the way. Tuck him up there for a minute. I'm just going to undo the main electrical connector on the back of the alternator and the little plug that goes in the back. That's all the wiring off the alternator. And then it's actually only held in with 2 bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom. Sounds easy now, doesn't it? Once they're out, I should then be able to pull the alternator out and pop the new one in. Just pop it in. I'm actually on tiptoe now. So the last little plug on the back of the alternator I need to do from above. I can't quite get to the little clip that you undo to pull it off, making it more difficult from down here, so from above be a lot easier. So I've got the plug off the back of the alternator, so that's all the wiring done, it's just the 2 bolts. The top bolt I can actually get to while I'm up here. I can just reach down here just below the cam cover and quite easy to get to with a little 13mm ratchet. So I've undone that, twiddle it out and take it right out. And then it's just the 1 bolt on the bottom, he says, and then we should be able to wiggle the alternator out. So that's the top bolt out. Let's get that bit of wiring out of the way. So that's our alternator wiring and our aircon wiring actually. I'll tuck him up here for the moment. Look at that. Loads of room now. Dipstick, yeah, okay, might be in the way. But I might be able to go forward enough to bring it round here. That's what I'm hoping. Obviously, if you took it to VW, they'd pull the whole front of your van off, which we could have done. But then that means, I think they normally slide it out in these massive long service pins, so they bring the whole rad pack out of the way and then get to it. But yeah, I think I can do it from underneath, no problem.
Yep.
So the only trouble is with this bolt is that it is actually, it's going to end up butting up against the tensioner. So I'm going to have to pull the tensioner down to get the bolt out. I think it should then clear. Okay. So it's just a quick inspection under Sean's van. I noticed his heat shield was pushed up against his exhaust. He's obviously been going through the floods at speed. Tell him off for that. But also, he's missing half his under tray. Look at this. So there should be another bit that's fixed to this. This is all just literally snapped off and gone. Very similar to what I did to Steve's actually. But look at all the debris that's got stuck up round the fuel tank. So we need to clean that out and then pop a new under tray on, I think. But they are readily available from VW, believe it or not. So I'm just popping the last bolt out. Obviously I've got hold of the tensioner as well with this hand. Just sliding out with that. There we go. Let the tensioner go, but I'm leaving my knuckle bar on there with the tensioner so it's easy to get hold of later when we put the belt back on. So now I should be able to wiggle the alternator off its brackets and wiggle it out the bottom. Just teasing it off its mounts. Obviously when the bolts do up, the trap nuts on the back of the alternator tighten up against the bracket. So it's not tight, but there we go. Just wiggle him off. Let's get rid of the lever bar. It's not going to fall down. And now, this is the bit that could be lots of fun. Or do-si-do your partner. Country dancing. Hang on a minute.
Oh.
Here we go.
Hey.
Right, there's that one. Yeah, let's have him. So he needs to go on over here. And you see the trap nuts here. So as you tighten these up, they pull in against the alternator bracket, hence why it was tight. So you could tap these with a hammer back this way to loosen them, whereas these are loose, ready to go, and then they will tighten up when we tighten the bolts up. Okay, let's have a go at popping this back in. Okay, let's just wiggle it up into position. What's that stuck on now? Okay, let's just wiggle it up into position. The two bolts into the alternator's bolted back in place, so all I have to do now is pop the aircon unit back on, our engine mount in, put the belt on, and sort the wiring out. Done. Well, that's that complete. So now it's the moment of truth. Give it the fire up and see what we've got. There we go, charging at 14.7 volts when we first fire it up, which is what I'd expect to see. So that is now charging like a raging bull. Much, much better than the original alternator. So it should charge like that for a little while until the battery's topped up, and then the charging will back off. So I'm going to leave it running so it charges up. That poor battery hasn't had a proper charge for ages. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.